This is Bloomberg Businessweek Daily, reporting from the magazine that helps global leaders stay ahead, with insight on the people, companies, and trends shaping today's complex economy, plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Businessweek Daily with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec, live on Bloomberg Radio, television, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Bloomberg Businessweek Daily. I'm Carol Massar, along with Tim Stenovec. And yeah, it's Jobs Report Eve. Wait, it's not, is it?
No, I don't think it's going to happen. Government shutdown entering day 2, Carol. And yeah, we are seeing some movement in the markets as a result of some data that we're getting, but it is not government data that we're getting because that government shutdown not helping us in that regard.
Yeah, and the rally was running out of steam, but now we're off our lows. There's a lot going on. All right, so ahead this hour, what are we going to tackle? President Trump is weighing slashing thousands of federal jobs. It's a key topic for a meeting with his budget director, Russell Vought, on the U.S. labor market. As Tim mentioned, we're going to talk about some of that private market data. We're going to talk about the U.S. economy, Fed policy. We'll do that with our own Michael McKee and Nikki Lanier. She's formerly of the St. Louis Fed, so we'll have a deep roundtable on all of that.
And strap in, because we are blasting off with the president of the space telecom company, AST SpaceMobile, taking on Elon Musk and SpaceX, and the stock has been on a tear.
Unbelievable, the run-up that we've seen this week. And the Conformable Decoders Research Group at the MIT Media Lab. If you feel kind of stupid because you don't know what it is, join the crowd, because we weren't either. But we did a deep dive. It's on a mission, a long-term mission, to shape the minds of young people who will drive the future. Why you should care. We're going to get into that in the next 60 minutes.
All that and more coming up in the next hour right here on Bloomberg Businessweek Daily. First up, though, a check on the day's trade and top business stories. Here she is, Alexis Christoforous, in for Charlie Pallett. Hey, Alexis.
Right. Thanks, guys. Yeah, it is day 2 of this government shutdown. And you know what? Stocks are rallying to records. We've got the Dow up 82 points right now. The S&P at a fresh all-time high on a gain of 4. NASDAQ also in record territory, climbing 77. Treasury yields are mixed. We've got the yield on the 10-year at 4.08%, while the 2-year is at 3.54%. Gold taking a breather from that recent record run, but we've got West Texas Intermediate crude down for the 4th consecutive day at $60.45 the barrel. Tesla reported a surprise increase in sales in the 3rd quarter as the electric car maker likely benefited from a rush by consumers to take advantage of that tax credit before it expired. Even so, shares of Tesla now down 4%. And McDonald's is embarking on a multi-billion-dollar global expansion to increase its store count by 50,000 locations over the next 4 years. It's also trying to be within a 5-minute drive from as many people as possible. Shares of McDonald's up 0.4%. And chip stocks on a tear once again. Nvidia at a record high on a gain of nearly 1%. AMD and Broadcom along for the ride. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Alexis Christoforous. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Over to Carol and Tim.
All right, Alexis, thank you so much. She has set us up for, what do we have, about 2 hours to go until the closing bell. A lot coming at investors once again. Hey, one of the things we wanted to get into is what we've heard from D.C. and the White House. President Trump said to be weighing cutting thousands of federal jobs ahead of that meeting that he is having with his budget director, Russell Vought. This is as the White House looks to really ratchet up pressure on Democrats to end a government shutdown that has entered its 2nd day. Meantime, we got another read on the U.S. employment picture from the private sector. Timmy had U.S. employers dialing back hiring plans in the month of September. They announced fewer job cuts, according to data from outplacement firm Challenger Gray and Crispin. We're getting a lot of data points, but we're not getting government ones this week.
With the latest on the U.S. economic picture, back with us is a Bloomberg Radio and TV international economics and policy correspondent, Michael McKee. He joins us here in the Bloomberg Business Week studio. Let's talk about the Challenger Gray and Christmas data. There have been a couple different narratives. There's low hire, low fire environment. And then we've also heard about a no hire, no fire environment. Is that what we're in?
Yeah, I don't think you can even discern the difference between the two at this point. When you figure your starting point is there are 170 million jobs in the United States. So if you're talking about even 100,000 jobs, companies last month announced plans, according to Challenger Gray and Christmas, to add 117,000 jobs. Now, that's worldwide. That's not just in the United States. So it's really hard to figure out the impact of all this stuff. I think that when you look at the Challenger data, and we don't usually consider it a front tier level.
I was thinking the same thing. Like yesterday we're talking ADP, today we're talking Challenger Grand
welcome
Christmas.
to the new world order.
The problem with
bit.
Challenger is that it is A, worldwide, and B, it doesn't account for time periods. So when companies say they're going to release people, how long is that going to take? How many of them might be moved into other jobs? How much is attrition versus firing? So it isn't an easy read to say this is going to happen because they said that. But you can sort of take trends from it. When you see a big increase, as we did earlier in the summer, of layoffs, you get an impression that, people are cutting back. And we saw that when all the tech companies were cutting a year ago.
Yeah.
Now they're saying that the plans to add jobs is the weakest September hiring intentions since 2011. And they say that companies are at the low end of estimates for hiring people for the holiday season. So you can probably say those are relatively accurate observations of the labor situation at the moment.
Did you see, and forgive me if I mispronounce, Revelio Labs? They had some data out today. It showed employment increased about 60,000 in September, an improvement from a month earlier. Again, strange times. We would never normally probably talk about this.
Well, they're new anyway, so we're just getting used to their data. We haven't got a lot to benchmark it with it. But the overall, the 60,000 jobs they say were likely added in September is within the scope of what economists were thinking in terms of the non-farm payrolls. They say 57,000 in private sector jobs. Again, that's sort of in line with what was expected. So you can take that for what it's worth. We'll see how close they came when we finally do get the data. And if it turns out to be a very reliable indicator, then of course everybody's going to start following that.
Mike, Carol, go ahead, Carol.
No, go, please.
So I wanted to go with what Carol mentioned about the federal workers and the president's meeting with Russell Vought of OMB, Project 2025. We know how Russell Vought thinks about federal employees, and increasingly the president making it clear that during a shutdown, this could be an opportunity to actually fire thousands of federal employees. What do you think is the economic impact of that, or could it be?
Well, it could have an economic impact depending on how, let me put it this way, it will have an economic macro impact on the country depending on how many people are fired. Obviously, has a big economic impact on any particular person who loses their job.
Yes.
I think one starting place for thinking about any of this is that the president can get rid of federal workers any time if he follows the proper procedures in the Administrative Procedures Act. So this is really just an excuse, using the shutdown as an excuse to fire people. They chopped thousands of people from the federal payrolls, the Doge people did, and that wasn't during a shutdown. So, I wouldn't take the here's an opportunity thing. Yeah, it's an opportunity for PR, but it's not a reason why they have to cut people. It's not the shutdown is requiring them to cut anybody. Then it just depends on who's cut and where they're cut. The state with the most number of federal employees is California, and so if you cut all the people in California, you're going to have a big impact there, but maybe less of an impact than you would have in Maryland or Virginia, which are third and second on the list and are concentrated right around the Washington, D.C. area. Obviously, a big reduction in force there would have a big impact on the local economies.
We should point out that the president did put out a social media post earlier today saying, I have a meeting today with Russ Vought, he of Project 2025 fame, to determine which of the many Democrat agencies, most of which are a political scam, he recommends to be cut, and whether or not those cuts will be temporary or permanent. He goes on to say, I can't believe the radical left Democrats gave me this unprecedented opportunity. They are not stupid people, so maybe this is their way of wanting to quietly and quickly make America great again. And of course, signed by the president.
Just one thing that struck me about this post, Mike, was the way that during the campaign, if we were talking a year ago, the president, before he was elected for this term, really distanced himself from Project 2025.
I don't know anything about it. I'm not going to do any of that.
They delayed the publication of the book that had the foreword by Russell. That's completely, he's embraced it.
I think the president's relationship with the truth is something everybody realizes is not very tight. So you kind of have to take that into consideration. And then all of the florid language that Carol was reading, that's the way he talks. And so it's really a question for economics of what is the actual impact going to be. And for that, as I said, we need to know who's being cut and where they're being cut.
We want to bring someone in. One last question to you, and then you're going to join us in this roundtable. But when you look, you always remind us 1 month's report and so on and so forth. At this point, we look at the trend line, and I pulled up non-farm payrolls. Of course, we are not expecting a read tomorrow, but the trend line has been for lower and lower job creation.
Yes, I mean, if you look at the other indicators that have come out this week, the ISM manufacturing report's still under 50, suggesting contraction or very low hiring. The ADP report, which obviously got a lot of people's attention, suggesting low hiring. And then when you look at the Conference Board's consumer confidence numbers about job availability, they are the lowest since 2021. So people are absorbing the idea that it isn't a great labor market right now.
We certainly hear that for college grads and others. Mike's going to stay with us. Let's bring in Nikki Lanier. She's former St. Louis Fed Senior Vice President. She is now CEO of Harper Slade. They're a racially equity advisory firm that emphasizes inclusive leadership, but she also, of course, keeps a close watch on what's going on at the Fed and the global economy and the U.S. economy for those folks that she advises. Nikki, how challenged is the U.S. economy in your view? And what do you hear from the mayors, the governors, the Fed members, Fed presidents, and business members or business leaders that you talk to? What are their concerns about the U.S. economy?
Oh my gosh, there's just so many. There's so many concerns. I'm hearing this overwhelmed, the sense of being overwhelmed, this theme of feeling as though the sky is falling, the elusive exhale that seems to have been in place since the beginning of January, since the beginning of this regime. And, you know, markets, businesses, governments, both local and otherwise, households have come to find respite on some level, in some level of stability and predictability ushered in by the United States government. And to the extent that this regime seems to be entirely focused on the injection of chaos as the standard bearer for their ethos, for their decision making, it is de facto disruptive, not just to the economy, but to hearts and minds and to feelings and the fundamental understanding of how government ought work. And so it just feels like a really untenable time for people to make decisions about anything, given the flooded realities of kind of the uncertainty that seems to be unrelenting.
And yet, Nikki, and I want to make sure, you know, you cover and focus on the macroeconomic environment and you understand the economy, but we can't ignore markets here. You say all that, yet we see equity markets at record highs and optimism when it comes to how CEOs of companies are feeling about the environment right now. How do you explain that?
Yeah, so there's all kinds of opportunities where we have seen my days with the Fed where we see what feels like conflicting data. And so we are 2 days into this shutdown and however many months into this administration. And sometimes the economic realities are a little bit slower to catch up to economic sentiment. And I think that might be what we're seeing here. There are real consequences to the choices that are being made from Washington, D.C. And sometimes those consequences feel more acute. They feel more localized before they are metastasized and felt in reverberating ways across the United States and across markets as a whole. But I don't believe with any fiber of my being that we will remain unscathed as a competitive marketplace, given the posture and the priorities of this administration.
Well, let me ask you who you think is being scathed at the moment. Are we seeing the kind of traditional first in, first out kind of economy here where people at the lower end of the income scale are already starting to suffer, but maybe it doesn't show up as much because what they spend is so much lower than what the upper half spends?
I think that's true. I think that's right. It's harder to see that manifest in the data in what is relatively a short term into the administration's tenure. But yes, I think that's absolutely right. I think the acuity will always be and has always been felt by those who have the least and those who are oftentimes have less accessibility to some of the stabilizing frameworks that the country has put in place to ensure, economic resiliency and sustenance. I think it's going to be some time before we actually see how this plays out, but most certainly bearing the brunt of the decision making that's coming from our president and coming from the White House are the most vulnerable citizens, certainly minorities, citizens, and people who are in need of services and who've become very reliant on the stability of the government for the same.
Nikki, what I want to ask you then, so because there are those that feel the economic pressure more here now and aren't maybe reflected in a record stock market, the so-called K-shaped, economy or recovery that we saw coming off of COVID, how might that lead to a Fed policy misstep, meaning maybe being more helpful to those who are struggling more, but maybe that's not the right thing, maybe paying more attention to the other side, but then that hurts those who are less fortunate economically?
Yeah, if I might, Carol, just kind of add to what adds complexity to what you're asking is the absence of the data that the Fed has become reliant upon. So data problem is huge, both at macro and micro levels at this point. And the reliability of that data is de facto compromising to the way that the Fed can consume the information that it needs for purposes of meaningful and material deliberations around policymaking. And so one of the things that I think the Fed has been attuned to, at least when I was there a couple of years ago, is really thinking about the costs of inequity at macroeconomic levels versus the microeconomic levels. We know that there's some real demographic realities that are in front of us that are changing the landscape, if you will, of who is available to work, who's available to buy and spend and invest and save, who's available to purchase homes, who's available to attain higher education. That is ever more increasingly more women and more Blacker and browner citizens. And that's a reality that our monetary policy frameworks and economic studies have just not necessarily been able to contemplate in years past. But we'll most certainly need to do so now. And so I think that we're just seeing that compounded with the realities of what's coming out of DC policymaking that just makes this extraordinarily daunting to unpack.
You say that the policymakers are going to have to take this into account. That was part of their monetary policy framework for the last couple of years, and now they've dropped it in part because they're getting a lot of pressure from the politicians who say that the socioeconomic part of this is not the Fed's job, it's the Fed's job just to keep prices in line. So how do they go about that?
And just got about 30 seconds here, Nikki.
Okay. Yeah, so it's a complex issue. So I think that the Fed has struggling with whether it is a socioeconomic issue alone versus a macroeconomic issue that will at some point impact how the entire economy is able to sustain itself, given the need for us to rely on the population that we have. We have to be able to activate the full human capital construct in order to run our country. And if there are encumbrances in our ability to do that, that becomes a macroeconomic issue that the Fed has to pay attention to.
Good to discuss, considering we focus so much on the kind of day-to-day headline, and there are bigger macro issues at play. Nikki, thank you so much. Nikki Lanier, former St. Louis Fed Senior VP, now CEO of Harper Slade, and of course, always our thanks to Bloomberg TV, international economics and policy correspondent and radio, Michael McKee. Coming up, the other space race and how to compete against Elon's Starlink. That's next.
It's 2:21 on Wall Street. I'm Alexis Christoforous. Stock market is staring down day 2 of a government shutdown and rallying to record highs. The Dow Jones Industrial Average at its best level of the session now, up 127 points. The S&P 500 gaining nearly 10 at a record high, I might add. The NASDAQ Composite also in record territory on a gain of 91 points. NASDAQ 100 also rallying to a fresh high. Gold pulling back from that recent run, though, and we have got WTI WTI crude lower for the fourth straight day. It's official. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway has reached a deal to buy Occidental Petroleum's chemical business. It's a $9.7 billion all-cash deal. It's expected to close in the fourth quarter. Shares of Occidental Petroleum, though, under pressure, down more than 7% after rallying ahead of this announcement. And the maker of the Jeep Wrangler and Ram pickup truck, Stellantis, reporting a 6% jump in U.S. sales last quarter, snapping a streak of quarterly sales declines. Shares of Stellantis up better than 8%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Alexis Christophorous. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Alexis, thank you so much. You are listening and watching Bloomberg Businessweek Daily. Well, if you think of satellites in space, you often think about Elon Musk and SpaceX, and yet there are a few other players in the space, among them AST SpaceMobile. Shares of the company, man, they are taking off this week, up about 30% in the past 2 days, hitting an all-time high today, up 210% year to date. It is a nearly it's more than $23 billion market cap. It's a wireless telecom company deploying satellites in space to be accessible for smartphones. And just yesterday, Barclays raised the firm's price target to $60 a share from $37 and keeps an overweight rating on the share stock at 65 and change. Delighted to have with us Scott Wisniewski. He is president of AST SpaceMobile, as we said, joining us from Boston. So great to have you here with us, Scott. You've got to be busy. It sounds like you're super busy. If I do a search, there's like various press releases coming out. Your Bluebirds satellites, 8 to 16, they're in various stages of production. My understanding is you guys have planned launches every 1 to 3 months on average this year and into next year. You're on track to complete 40 phased arrays by early next year and expect 45 to 60 satellites in orbit by the end of 2026. Tell me if I've got it all right, and tell us about this build out and capabilities and who ultimately is signing up to use it.
Well, thank you for having us. Our company is entirely focused on this opportunity of providing wireless access from space directly to the phone in your pocket. So to do this, we're vertically integrated. We build our own satellites, as you were just discussing. We're based in Texas, here in the United States, and we're partnered with over 50 mobile network operators globally. That's how we go to market, because those are the folks who have the customers today, nearly 3 billion of them with the partners that we have. So we're focused on building this network out. We have about an 8-year history as a company. We have over 3,700 patent and patent pending claims on developing this new technology. It sounds far-fetched at first, talking to your regular small phone in your pocket from low Earth orbit, but that's the capability that we have. And this is really important, I think, for everyone, because there's 6 billion phones out there in the world. And as we know, we depend on connectivity so much, and it's very important that that phone works, whether it's convenience, peace of mind, or emergencies, and that's what we're focused on.
Starlink has partnered with T-Mobile. You have partnered with AT&T and Verizon. What can you tell customers about when they can actually expect continuous coverage nationally and perhaps even globally as a result of this partnership?
Right. And so we actually have investment from about 6 different mobile network operators around the world, as well as American Tower, who's the largest tower company in the world, and Google. And so in the United States, yes, like you said, we're partnered with AT&T and Verizon, both investors. And it's very important for us to have that close relationship, because the way we've built the company, our service is purpose-built for the mobile phone in your pocket, so that it just works. And the key there is to be deeply integrated with the operator and solve the operator's problems so they can deliver value to their customers. So we're organized today around getting service out next year. And we're currently have about 5 satellites in orbit. We just announced our plans to deliver number 6 and 7 to the launch pad. And as you said earlier, we're looking to put up 45 to 60 by the end of next year. And so this capability is just very important in the United States, but also around the world.
Well, tell us who you anticipate or who are right now your biggest customers. I'm curious about commercial, residential, and I'm also curious about government.
No, that's right. And the important thing about our company too is, space has historically been a bit of a niche. If you live in a rural area or if you're on a plane and you want connectivity, there are nice little markets there. But this is about going to the mass market, the 6 billion mobile phones in the world. And so That goes for people who live, work, and travel, go in and out of coverage, who have greater ability to pay and want that convenience, as well as people who live perhaps in rural areas who don't have good connectivity or are willing to pay a little bit more a month to have cellular broadband. Again, this is not a text service. This is a cellular broadband service that we'll be selling. So that's our U.S. and really developed economy story. When you go around the world, there's many countries, though, where there's over 2 billion people today who don't have good 3G or better service on their phones. That means 2G or nothing. And so market by market, our service is valuable to the users and to the operators who support those end users. And then you mentioned U.S. government. That's been a relatively new add to our story in the last 2 years. But given the defense and space backdrop in the United States, this is something that's been front and center for us for the last 2 years. And we're already providing services to the U.S. government from orbit.
So, Scott, you probably know this little company called SpaceX that is out there. And I'm just curious, they did a deal with EchoStar. They became the first company to amass control of the satellite constellations in outer space, the launch infrastructure to deliver them there, and the potential for direct connections with mobile devices on the ground. So there's SpaceX. They're kind of the big behemoth there, the big player. There's you guys. There's Amazon.com. There's Global Star in the race for ubiquitous coverage. How do you plan to compete with Starlink, which already has thousands of satellites in orbit?
Right, and I think for the layman, it's important to distinguish between service to a dish that you might put on your house or on a car or on a plane, and then the phone in your pocket, right? We all have Wi-Fi at home, and then we have a cell phone for when we're on the go. So this is a market, the cellular market from space, that's brand new. You've seen some players start to enter it, including Apple and Starlink, but we've been at this for about 8 years. This solution is tailor-made, purpose-built for this solution. This is not an add-on new service for us. This is all we do. And that's why we've been able to garner such incredible support from network operators globally, like AT&T and Verizon in the US, Vodafone in Europe, Rakuten Mobile in Japan, Bell Canada, who we just announced cellular broadband testing from Canada today with, who's also an investor in us. So these are capabilities that have been developed with the network operator in mind. We are focused on making their network better so that they can deliver the value to the customer.
Are you not saying that you're competing with SpaceX and Starlink, that you're completely different businesses?
Well, we plan to go after the cellular user through the mobile network operator. They also have a strategy, as you said, that they're pursuing. But this is a market that we think is big. It's going to be worth tens of billions of dollars. There's 6 billion phones out in the world that go in and out of coverage. And all of us know that feeling when we don't have a signal, you're helpless. And so we think that, and all of our over 50 network operator partners think that this is something that really enhances the value of the cellular plan that almost all of us have, certainly in the United States. And so that is a strategy that's good. That's going to be a nice, robust market. And we expect with our technology to be the leader in that because we're doing broadband from space.
You mentioned your work with the U.S. government over the last 2 years. Can you expand on that a little bit? What exactly are you doing for the U.S. government?
Yeah, so it's probably worth taking a step back. We currently operate the 5 largest satellites in low Earth orbit commercially. That low Earth orbit for the layman is, that's where the space station is. It's much closer to the planet. It's that lag you experience when you have a geosynchronous satellite. LEO solves all that. So we have the largest satellites deployed in low Earth orbit. The one we're shipping to the launch pad in 2 weeks is 3 times the size, over 2,400 square feet. So this is a unique technology that was developed to talk to the small phone and to do it well and to navigate crowded cellular airwaves. But it also has other applications. So with our U.S. government business, we see up to 10 different use cases, both communications and non-communications, that can support the U.S. government mission for defense. And importantly, one of the ones we're testing in orbit today has, and we've been doing it for over a year, has really strategic and valuable implications, including potentially for the Golden Dome project. You also mentioned the notion that it's not just texting and being able to make calls. This is broadband delivered from a satellite to wherever you are in the world. That's the idea here. What is the experience using the phone in that environment, and how could that be different or similar than using a 5G LTE network? What are the speeds we're talking here? That's right. And so from the beginning, and again, this is why we've been partnered with the network operators. They've been in the room with us testing and developing this tech for 5+ years. And what means is we're integrated on the back end. You remember, everyone's got a vision in their mind of calls in the old days where someone would be connecting the call and doing this. Well, that technology still exists in the world. It's just done with servers and with software. And so we're deeply integrated on that side of the business so that the phone just works. And so this is a native cellular broadband experience. The user doesn't know that there's a difference unless we want them to. And they can do text, calling, native calling, video, streaming, and they can do all these applications, and it feels just like you're using your phone on an LTE and 5G network.
So how fast? Like, what are we talking megabits per second here, up and down?
So we've tested over 20 megabits per second to the cell in the past couple of years with our satellites in orbit. With the, there was mention of a spectrum deal a moment ago. We did our own spectrum transaction earlier this year, very similar type of spectrum, which is about 40 plus megahertz in the United States. And with 40 megahertz, we can deliver 120 megabits to the cell on the ground. Now, how you manage all the network traffic and how do you go to market is a critical decision we make with our partners around the world, including in the United States. But there's only one way to get broadband capabilities from space, and that's with a big satellite, and we have the biggest.
On the connection side of things, we're wondering too about the experience of being inside and outside. Anyone who's used like a Garmin head unit, for example, on a bike knows that you have to use it outside to get the cell signal. Can this coverage go inside buildings?
That's right. We can do one wall in. So some of the success factors for that are the fact that, again, we have a big satellite, and we also use low band spectrum. That's part of our partnership with AT&T and Verizon, is combining some low band spectrum that they have from decades ago. And so the low band spectrum propagation characteristics are the best. And as you go into mid band, even then, it's still pretty good. So we can do about one wall in, which means a building, means a car, means a plane.
Okay. That's what we were, because I think there were some folks like kind of messaging, what is he talking about? Hey, you mentioned that you guys have picked up spectrum, 40 megahertz. Do you want to buy any more if some comes up for auction?
Well, in the space world, there's two big bands of spectrum that matter. It's called L and S. We just purchased long-term access to the L band in the United States and Canada earlier this year. And that gives us a big chunk of spectrum, the biggest available in the most valuable wireless market in the world, which is the US. We also purchased an international filing that allows us to go around the world and pick up other pieces of spectrum for space. So we're pretty happy with our spectrum position now after those two moves. This, again, is consistent with our historical strategy of sharing cellular spectrum with the operators, but it gives us more lanes of traffic and the ability to do better services to more subscribers. So we like our strategy in both of those two bands that matter.
All right, we've got to run. So appreciate this deep dive. I hope you'll come back, keep us abreast of what you guys are working on and how things are going. Scott, thanks. Have a great rest of the week and weekend. Scott Wisniewski, he's president of AST SpaceMobile, joining us here. When we come back, cutting edge tech and women's health.
It's 2:40 on Wall Street. I'm Alexis Christoforous. Stocks rallying to records despite day two of the government shutdown and President Trump threatening thousands of federal workers could lose their jobs. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 133 points right now. The S&P 500 gaining 10. The NASDAQ Composite up 95. Each of those indexes in record territory, as is the NASDAQ 100, up now 95 points. Gold, though, pulling back from that recent rally run at 38.47. Employers dialed back their hiring plans in September and also announced fewer job cuts. That's according to outplacement firm Challenger Gray and Christmas. This shutdown is delaying crucial federal economic data, including today's weekly unemployment claims and tomorrow's monthly jobs report. The artificial intelligence trade is alive and well. We've got shares of NVIDIA up 0.8% to a record high, and Tesla's shares are actually down about 4%, despite the EV maker posting record U.S. sales last quarter as customers raced to buy EVs before the federal tax credit expired. And OpenAI's valuation soaring to $500 billion, topping Elon Musk's SpaceX to become the world's largest startup. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Alexis Christoforous. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Alexis, thank you so much. So I got to say, I love when we learn something new. And conformable decoders, raise your hand if you know what they are when it comes to the human body. Tim's not.
I'm not raising my hand. I have no idea what you're talking about.
I did not, but I found out, we did some deep diving. It's all about converting the patterns of nature and the human body into beneficial signals and energy. Disruption, folks. We talk about it a lot. Yes, AI. Yes, crypto. Yes, other things. Yes, it plays into our next guest and what she's looking at. Our next guest joined the MIT Media Lab back in 2017 to establish and direct, at that time, a new research group called Conformable Decoders. So let's get to our weekly Business Week Women's Health segment, where we focus on key issues in developing technologies that are impacting the present and future of women's health around the world. Joining us right now is Dr. Canan Dagdeviren. She is Associate Professor of Media Arts and Sciences at MIT, Director of Conformable Decoders Research Group at the MIT Media Lab, and she joins us from Cambridge, Massachusetts. Dr. Dagdeviren, it is good to have you here on Bloomberg Businessweek Daily. You set up this lab, 8 years ago? Tell us what it's all about and the work you're doing.
Thank you so much, first of all, summarizing my work very elegantly. I really appreciate it, and great to be with you today. And my work at the Media Lab underlines conformable, malleable, flexible, and stretchable technologies that you can simply laminate any part of your body, all the way from breast to skin, which is the largest organ, or even implant in deeper regions in your body, such as brain. And we need to do that because imagine we live in an ocean of physical patterns, heart rates, respiration, neuronal activity, and all this information, biological language that I call, contains information inside. And we need to create technologies which can have intimate integration with your body part to extract this biological language and simply, like a Google translation, translate the biological language into electrical language so that we can create a smart interface between individuals as well as medical doctors who can do interventions in a smart and personalized way.
When you talk about interventions, what we're talking about is essentially helping people cure disease or live longer, healthier, happier lives. But specifically, the technology that you're working on, what does it address? Like, what is the hope that it solves?
Great question. First of all, this project, which is a conformable ultrasound technology to empower women to enable early breast cancer detection, is a multi-year project. It's not we do it like within a night or so. So I would like to emphasize the dedication, the efforts that we all put together with a diverse team of students, collaborators, and so on. And this technology is a technology which can be a part of your personal bra, and you can wear it, and while drinking your coffee, within sub-seconds, it can tell you any anomaly with pinpoint accuracy and with the coordination. And you may ask, why this is important? It is important because half of the population, which is women population, has a long-lasting problem that needs to be addressed, which is breast cancer. And current standard care of screening is mammography. And if Carolyn experienced this, it's a very painful technology.
It's not fun. It's lousy. I'm just going to put it out there.
It's not fun, exactly. It smashes very personal part of yourself. Mm-hmm. And plus, it doesn't work perfectly on me because I have a high breast density. I am 40 years old, so I need to have an adjunct technology, which is ultrasonography. And majority of the high-risk women, patients, like around 40 percentile of this woman, develop breast cancer in between two mammographies, which is called interval cancer. It's the most aggressive phenotype. But by the time you are diagnosed, your survival rate decreases to 22 percentile. So we say, imagine a world in which a technology can enable you to check your breast tissue regularly because it is safe and non-radiative, and you can use it simply at home, and within, again, sub-seconds, you can check the anomalies. And by collecting a lot of data and also co-integration of the AI open new paths by using lots of data, we can even estimate what will happen to your anomaly or under medication, throughout the medication, how your breast cyst or tumor is changing over time. So we can give all this information on time and very effectively and safe. And with this, we can increase the survival rate up to 98 percentile, which is amazing.
Which is amazing. It's unbelievable. Dr. Dagdeviren, so is this being used? Is it in test trials? Because it sounds like so logical. And I'm just curious, though, or is it expensive if we all have one of these devices? So that's where the problem is. Why aren't we doing this? And I know you've recently launched a women's health program, WHX. So you're looking at this and what can be done to kind of close some of the gaps that are out there between men and women. So something like this, are we using it, or is it just in a test phase? And how soon do we get kind of move towards this kind of diagnosing and really being on top of healthcare, women's or other?
Yeah, again, amazing question. The current situation with our technology, we are conducting our intensive human trials here at MIT as well as at MGH, where our medical collaborators are. And we are getting very promising results, and we publish multiple papers and patents. And of course, later on, one of the main goals of WHX that we launched newly at MIT Media Lab is to do translational aspect of the work. Of course, as a researcher writing a paper, raising new generation of students, and writing the patents are great, but it's not enough. So we really want this technology to be real in the market and used by the people who are in need. And with our best estimation, of course, with the substantial financial support to run our experiments and do the trials, we hope this technology will be available less than 4 to 5 years. And
wait,
currently we are already
45 years. What?
4 to 5 years.
Oh, 4 to 5.
4
okay.
to 5 years.
Okay, I'm good with that. One of the things, I know Tim wants to address something, because we've been talking a lot about wearables and technology. That's, Tim, stuff that's already out there in the market.
Yeah, we've spent a lot of time talking about wearable technology, and specifically the Oura Ring, for example, increasingly popular, $11 billion valuation. Just very briefly, when will we start to see this technology in consumer tech? For this kind of medical diagnosis or monitoring technologies, we definitely need FDA approval. And to do so, we also need, we need to collect many data. So specifically for our research, not only we do the human trials, we also get feedback from the human subjects, so that we can address the changes in our technologies, because adherence is an important aspect. Imagine you have the technology, it's in the market, but it's not used properly or not used by multiple populations. So our hope to make it affordable, which is extremely important and vital for us. And even right now in the research
Doctor, we unfortunately have to leave it there. So let's try and continue this conversation in the future. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Businessweek Daily with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio and Television.
All right, everybody, we're coming up, just about to enter the last hour of trading on this Thursday. Carol Massar, Tim Stenovec, live here in our Bloomberg headquarters studio. As for stocks, we're just up about 7 points on the S&P 500, but we've been talking about potential for records again on Wall Street, and NASDAQ 100, it is the outperformer, up about 0.9%, a gain of, Tim, nearly 4 percentage, not 4 percentage points, 0.4%.
Can you
Boy,
imagine?
that would get your attention.
Government shutdown, 4%.
Whoa.
I'm not even going to repeat it because, you know.
Because it was, no, not 4%,
Okay.
0.4%.
Okay. I'm Tim Stenovec along with Carol Massar. Let's take a look at some stocks on the move today. We're joined by Bloomberg News equities reporter Alex Semenova. Alex, we thought the stock would be moving higher.
Yeah, so it is kind of a dull day in markets today, kind of lackluster
Isn't it
trading,
weird?
but we always can count on Tesla to give us something to talk about. The company reported a surprise record quarter of vehicle sales as U.S. consumers picked up their electric car purchases before some of their federal tax credits expired. The company delivered 497,099 vehicles worldwide. This is 7.4% more than a year ago, with the Model Y SUV SUV and the Model 3 sedan combined sales rising 9.4% last quarter. People had rushed to take advantage of this $7,500 tax credit. Still, the stock is falling today. See it down now about 4%. Investors still have major questions regarding the earnings impact of legislative changes, choking off some of the regulatory stimulus that was helping Tesla a lot. And also Wall Street is still expecting that Tesla will log its second consecutive vehicle sales decline.
Yeah, just watching this. I mean, we're looking
this morning. I was like, Carol, it'll be a gainer for you, and I'll do Rivian as the decliner. And
no, 7% swing from top to bottom today.
Yeah, exactly. We also have to point out, CFRA highlights this, is that the risk reward right now is unfavorable, given the fact that it's rallied about 100% since April. So some of the expectations are perhaps a little bit too unrealistic.
All right. So two names we don't often talk about, look at, or think about unless we're like looking to get a loan or something, or checking our credit history. Talk to us about what's going on when it comes to kind of the consumer credit space.
Yeah, this was a really interesting story today. Fair Isaac Corporation, better known as FICO, will now sell credit scores directly to mortgage resellers. That is sending shares of some of those third-party credit bureaus tumbling today. TransUnion, Equifax, each dropped as much as 12%. Today, FICO shares, on the other hand, are surging to the biggest intraday gain on record. Analysts at Needham said that they expect this to be significantly beneficial for FICO, while also keeping costs stable, both for home buyers and mortgage originators. So pretty positive on the consumer front, cutting out the middleman here.
She sounds a little bored today. Are you?
Yeah, you know.
You're always incredible, but you sound a little bored.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Okay, well, let's try to maybe spice things up a little bit. We'll go to a little place, Omaha, Nebraska. Is where we find a small startup named Berkshire Hathaway.
Yeah, so it reached a deal today to buy Occidental Petroleum's petrochemical business at $9.7 billion in cash. The deal is the latest evidence that Warren Buffett's firm is once again back on the hunt after years of refraining from any kind of large takeovers and progressively unwinding large holdings like it did with Apple. The transaction is expected to close in the fourth quarter. Occidental is about 27% owned by Berkshire already, and the company actually said that they are done with deals. So perhaps kind of the last hurrah here for them for a while.
They're, I guess they're worried about their cash position, perhaps. $652 billion. And that's as of the end of June. So that might not even be
a lot of money spent.
Yeah, well, a lot of money on, their balance sheet to spend.
But another mover related to this is Occidental. It's the second worst performer in the S&P 500. It's down 7% on this.
Yeah, looks like that is having a bit of a rough day in response to the news today.
Yeah, it's surprising to see a move like that, especially when this was kind of telegraphed earlier this week. So, but you know what?
What?
Sometimes when the news hits, the stock still moves.
Yeah, exactly.
When it becomes official.
I hope you're not mad that I say that.
Oh, no, not at all. I mean,
it's just that kind of funny day,
I did preface by saying that it is kind of a dull day in markets. So
second day of a government shutdown. Who'd have thunk?
Not the most eventful stocks we're necessarily talking about today.
Well, that's what I found. We're
so used to talking about, the high flyers, the tech stocks, but
all of my gainers today for later on when we head over to our TV colleagues through the close, they're kind of like not names we talk about on a daily basis.
Hey,
you, however, are always amazing.
Thank you.
Alex Semenova is awesome.
She is.
I love joining you guys.
We love having you.
A big thank you to Bloomberg News Equities reporter Alex Semenova. For more conversations like this, check out our new Stock Movers podcast. You can subscribe for 5-minute episodes on the biggest winners and losers in the stock market. Check out Stock Movers on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts.
What?
Let's talk about Mr. Beast.
Oh, yes.
The cover story of Bloomberg Businessweek, the screen time issue. Lucas Shaw is going to be joining us a little later. Next hour on Bloomberg Radio, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals, a deep dive into the empire of Mr. Beast. We're talking about a thriller novel being co-written with a best-selling author. This is what you got to do if you're an influencer these days, a content creator. You got to have a burger. You got to have food. You got to have a novel.
All right. If you're like, I have no idea what Tim's talking about, then you're going to want to stick around because we're going to talk to Lucas Shaw about that and more. That's coming your way. We've got a great couple of hours coming. Do not go anywhere. The close coming your way on Bloomberg TV. Tim and I continuing on Bloomberg Businessweek Daily.